Hello everyone, welcome to another Book Review Wednesday. I will be your minion host for today's video, Ladybug, Minion Michelle, and today for this Book Review Wednesday we are going to be looking into a famous Stephen King book titled Misery, which was also made into a well-known film adaptation of this particular book. And basically, it follows the story of Paul, who is a writer, and he ends up encountering a crazy woman named Annie, which takes him hostage and basically threatens him to create this new story for a series of books that he's made over the years. And in particular, one of the characters within that series is a woman named Misery, hence the title, and also you can form other ideas as far as what the title is referring to, but largely it's referring to that particular character since she is constantly mentioned throughout. But basically, within the series, he ends up killing Misery off, and so the crazy fan that ends up capturing him, who really enjoys his books, which is the crazy woman named Annie, wants him to write this other book to sort of bring back this character to life, Misery. And obviously, she is very hostile to Paul, and she basically takes advantage of the fact that he is injured, which you will see within the beginning of the story. And she uses that to her advantage to try and control him, and it's very disturbing, the amount of crazy that she has. I mean, she is bonkers nuts, and she does very horrible things to Paul, which you will see within the book. And really, largely, the story tries to base itself off of Paul not only trying to survive, but also try to kind of get into Annie's mind and try to kind of outwit her and try to ultimately escape. And you'll also see throughout the story how he eventually discovers things about Annie and sort of her past as well. And in doing so, it does provide the reader with a lot more context as far as the character of Annie is concerned. And also, she's in a house that is fairly isolating, because basically she kind of just finds Paul and takes him to her house so that she'll quasi take care of him, but ultimately she just ends up being kind of just an abuser, not only psychologically but also physically as well, and she does some very disturbing things throughout the story, and it leaves you with sort of a guessing game. You're wondering how Paul is going to get out of this, if he's going to be able to get out of this somehow, because she is really holding him from the world and doesn't want him to really escape, and she kind of just wants to keep him and sort of use him for her own selfish ends to have this book completed. And you'll see how he tries to form certain ideas of the book, and how he sort of copes with the whole situation that he's in, and how that ultimately actually ends up impacting other people's lives as eventually some end up sort of coming into contact with Annie. So yeah, that's really the essence of the story in a nutshell. It is really well written. I mean, this story is Stephen King at its best. And he really does a good job of really creating in detail the whole setup, the environment, the characters, and it really works, I think, ultimately effectively. And you really do see the struggle that Paul is under, and you really do see the very bizarre and strange nature that surrounds Annie's character and how she's sort of unpredictable at times. And it really does create that unsettling environment that we would come to expect from around this time of year, in particular uh, Halloween. So it really does bring out the horror, but it also brings out a sense of um, willingness to live, because you do sort of see it in certain parts of Paul's character, and then other times you feel like he kind of wants to give up. And it's really interesting to see it play out in this dynamic, like having a male hostage under a female basically a male under a female uh, being taken hostage by her. That's just kind of, that's just not something you see oftentimes in a lot of these kinds of works. And I think it's sort of nice to see this sort of change in setup, because we usually don't see it too often, where a man is really being abused by a very crazy woman. So it's good that Stephen King kind of tries to play around with these ideas and kind of made his own work out of it. And I think here it really does offer what is expected out of a story like this. And I personally prefer these kinds of Stephen King stories, because although there's certain parts that are very strange and out there, it's not like it's completely out there. And it's also one where I think it is a little bit more relatable, because there is this survival aspect to it, especially when dealing with Paul's character and him wanting to ultimately escape and be free. So, in a way, it tries to be a horror story, but at the same time, I think there's this sort of down to earth approach to it that actually makes it rather unique from a lot of other Stephen King stories that focus on, something that's out of this world, like aliens or vampires, and it's nice to see how here it's largely like how this kind of a setup would probably be if there were to ever be such kinds of circumstances like this. And I think Stephen King did actually do some research beforehand as far as kind of understanding certain elements, like psychology and things like that. So uh, overall, the story really does work, and obviously it would get a film adaptation, and it's probably one of Stephen King's film adaptations that actually does stand out. It's probably up there with the Shining as being the other famous adaptation, I believe. So it's really a worthy recommendation if you're interested in those kinds of stories. It is a little bit lengthy, I will say that, but it is definitely worth the read. If you're interested in, a kind of hostage style, um, on the edge kind of story, this one I think really does suit that label well, and really brings out the misery and the horror that oftentimes gets thrown out there around this time of year. But I think that's really all I can say about this book, though, without really giving too much away. However, if there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, month, and year, and hopefully I can come by next year. I apologize that there's been a little bit of a delay with some of the videos. There have been some issues as far as uploading and things like that. So hopefully we should be caught up to today's video for today. But there might be a delay for Thursday's as well as Friday's video, because as minions have other plans that we need to sort of sort out. But yeah, I believe that's ultimately all I can say though. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Feel free to check out my previous video that I did last year. But hopefully I can come by next year. Thank you and goodbye.